This book is a crucial piece in a larger and necessary tapestry of historical knowledge about one of the most important Christian empires in history. The scope of this trilogy will guide you in a good understanding of its rise and fall, and I will give you a quick overview of the first volume in this awesome set, give you my perspective on some of these issues, and hopefully encourage you to study further into this important history. So stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Doing all these things really helps out, and I appreciate it. Also, I'll put my socials on the bottom and on the side, my Ko-Fi account, where you can donate if you want to, regularly or a single tip. Any of these things really helps. Also, my merch is listed there as well, so you can check that out. In this episode, I'm going over Byzantium, the Early Centuries, which is the first volume in a trilogy by John Julius Norwich. This edition is by Folio Society from 1990. Great condition. I found it online and actually not at a bad price. You can find the same edition or try to find whatever you prefer, whatever fits you best financially, and whatever you like. The point is the content. Content is king, as I always say, so focus on that always, but a nice edition is always good. I love the quality of the paper, quality of the construction of the book, and it does make reading more pleasant when you have these elements. Now, this book is more than just an introduction, of course, to the history of Byzantium. It quotes primary sources exhaustively. So, for those that just want to know the basic, most important aspects of Byzantium and get some good sources, this should be good enough. If you want more information or a deeper book, then I would always suggest to get complements to the book. So, for example, if you like Julian the Apostate, or if you like the iconoclastic controversy, then just get books on those topics to supplement this book, and it will really enrich your knowledge on the history. A very important focus in this book is Constantine the Great, because of his important influence on Christianity and in the history of the world in general. Because his conversion to Christianity and making it the official religion of the Roman Empire, and then moving also the center of the empire from Rome to Constantinople, changed history. And just these two acts are sufficient to cement him up there with Alexander the Great, Napoleon, etc. But I think his impact is even larger than these characters, just because of the religious element that is not there in others. Now, Constantine is a saint to the Orthodox Christians and not really to the Western Church, although the reasons why are quite interesting, and it has to do primarily with his conversion to Christianity, which I'll address in a second. But Constantine started the process of Christianizing the state by slowly changing the legal codes to reflect Christian morality, something that has lasted to this day, because even though most states today are part of a new religion called secular humanism, and they're slowly morphing the codes to reflect this new religious belief, we still can say that our codes are primarily Christian-based. And all this began with Constantine the Great. One of his very famous moves was to turn Sunday into a perpetual holiday, which, again, practiced by most of us to this day. And he didn't invent the holiday like some people sometimes claim. It was actually something already practiced by Christians for hundreds of years before he came along, because Saturday was treated as an important day, but the Lord's Day, the day of the resurrection, was treated as the most important day. So that's why we, to this day, have weekends, Saturday, Sunday. Both days were treated as sacred in Christian tradition, Sunday being its peak. Now, Constantine also had to struggle with plenty of different heresies at the time. So once he establishes Christianity as a religious system, and he has all these autocephalous churches that have their own bishops, he also discovers that there are plenty of heretical ideas and conflicts amongst them in which they don't seem to get their act together and declare in any way which ones are right and which ones are wrong, like the Donatists, the Meletians, etc. So then this engenders one of the most important aspects of early Christianity, which is the ecumenical council, which is a creation of Constantine to force all these autonomous churches to get in a room and agree on what dogma and doctrine should be on certain things. Because the church has always been managed by local synods and then communions with other autocephalous churches, so that because no one could agree and there was no centralized hierarchy, then how would they come into agreement about this? And usually the church managed it by a management of communions and small councils that would make declarations, and then they would excommunicate other groups, and then little by little things will fall into place. And the church was managed like that for the first 300 years. But for Constantine, this was not quick enough, and he decided to call the first council. And for the next 7 councils, this was the way that it always happened. An emperor would call a council, sit himself usually in an important throne right in the center, and he would command the bishops from all these different churches and their legates to come up with a solution to a problem, solve it, make a declaration, declare laws and canons, and be done with it. Very efficient and very state-like, which is obviously the nature of Constantine, who was not a theologian, he was an emperor. And of course, as we know, the ecumenical councils shaped Christianity forever because it forced the churches to speak in one voice and to look for unity in consensus. Constantine is also responsible for one of the most important doctrinal statements of belief in the history of Christianity, which is the term homoousios, to describe the relationship between the Father and the Son and its Trinitarian conception, meaning that the Son is one essence with the Father. And for Constantine, he was just affirming something that he learned from his mother and from other Christians, a belief that Christians held for centuries already by his time. But he wanted to make sure that everyone would agree on the term, because he also had the Arian heresy that was running around claiming that Jesus Christ was a creature and not really, in essence, God. He was a very exalted creature, but he was not God. So by Constantine using the term homoousios and then forcing all the bishops to sign, he basically established one of the most important doctrines of Christianity that, again, was already believed, but now it was put into paper as an imperial decree. So it's very important to understand that Christianity at its basis was engendered in a way, was developed and manifested at its highest point when it was joined to the state. Meaning the state and Christianity, by creating this merger, were able to actually engender Christendom itself. Christianity went from being a religion that was practiced by certain groups. It was spread out, a lot of disunity, and a lot of fighting with an empire that was primarily pagan, with pagan ideals and pagan conceptions of law and morality. So they were at constant odds with each other, to now merging and laws being a reflection of Christian ethics. And therefore Christianity is now an important part of the state. And this is actually what created Christendom and was able to put the religion into action, from being passively in the background of history into being in the center stage of history. This is why I always say that religions only function when they're merged with the state, because when they're not, the state then invents its own religion or adopts any religion and imposes it on the citizenry. And if you're in a different religion, this is not going to work for you. In other words, the state can never be truly secular. Today we have a secular humanist state, and therefore that's what's being imposed. and it's thus displacing Christian values from it because it's not its religion anymore. If Christianity was the religion of the state, then it would displace other religions out of the state. It's just a natural, normal thing that happens in governance. So to those that think that they can somehow get away from having some kind of religion in the state, they are mistaken. There's always going to be some kind of religion in the state. The question is, which one? Constantine understood this, and for this to function, the church had to be functional as well, because the governance of the church became a government interest for the empire. Now, when it comes to the controversy of Constantine actually entering the church, becoming a Christian, let me read you an important passage on this. And this is Constantine summoning the local bishop and addressing them. The long-awaited time has finally come when I have hoped and prayed to obtain the salvation of God. Now I too may have the blessing of the seal which confers immortality, the seal of salvation itself. I had thought to receive it in the waters of the Jordan, but it pleases God, who knows what is best for us, that I should receive it here. So be it then, and without delay. And should it be the will of Him who is Lord of life and death, that my existence here should be prolonged, I shall prescribe for myself henceforth a way of life that befits His service. And so Constantine, after years of waiting to get baptized, actually gets baptized, and he from then on is said to have arrayed himself in white garments and never wore the purple again. A type of renouncement of worldly power, basically, is the idea. So I don't think it was that strange that he waited all the way to his deathbed to convert, because at the time, conversion was an issue of the heart and baptism was always important. But a lot of people used to be afraid of becoming baptized and then doing some kind of sin and then being unable to enter heaven. Almost like they were becoming traitors to the faith if they baptized early. So a lot of people waited to be baptized. And this is something that the church actually addressed as an error, because it was very dangerous to do so. But for some, that means that he is seen as a hypocrite of some kind, or of some kind of hustler that was not really a Christian but became a Christian later. I find that hard to believe. I don't think the evidence points in that direction, but just giving you the way that a lot of people see it. Now, the book also covers, obviously, the period of Julian the Apostate, a very crucial study because we're talking about an emperor who's trying to reverse the changes in the state towards Christianity, to reverse them back to paganism. And a lot of his writings against Christianity are fascinating because it gives you a window into how people saw Christianity at the time, and the author goes into it in detail. Also, the fall of Rome is important because the Roman Empire has focused its center towards in Constantinople, so now Rome becomes a backwater and it's prone to invasions by barbarians, and it's pure chaos over there. I mean, that's really an important fact to understand. And so much so that every council of the church, the primary ecumenical councils, were all done in the east. That's how far Rome was from the center of action. And therefore, obviously, it also underscores the fact that this development of the Roman See as being the end of it all, the center of the universe, was really a later development. And the animosity between East and West is also pretty clear. Started everything by Constantine moving that center of the empire to the east. Now, the author does a great job simplifying the complex history of the early councils, the wrangling between bishops, the fascinating jurisdictional infights, and it also kind of underscores the fact that the church is a living institution, meaning it breathes, it moves, it has an outer limit, it has an inner core. There are disagreements. They try to get resolved through councils, but also through communion, breaking of communion, engaging in communions, and how the Pentarchy, which were the 5 primary autocephalous churches, managed themselves and each other, how they would appeal to each other for support when 2 of them were in a fight with the other 3, etc. And also, the book obviously has to explore the fact that the Bishop of Rome, the Patriarch of Rome, who held the traditional role, first among equals, in the sense of appeals, basically, that if there was a fight between 2 or 3 of the sees, like Alexandria and Antioch, etc., then they could appeal to Constantinople, or they could appeal to the Bishop of Rome. And the Bishop of Rome was special because of Peter, but it was never seen really as a god king of some sort that has universal jurisdiction, because a lot of times they would have disputes with Rome and they would appeal to Constantinople, or they would appeal to Jerusalem. So obviously, if you can dispute even the person sitting in the chair of the Bishop of Rome, is because he doesn't hold that big of an important position, to the point in which emperors call councils not really the Bishop of Rome, and you could break communion with Rome if they were in error. So obviously that shows a more horizontal system and less of a vertical system. And a lot of the exaggeration of power of the Bishop of Rome has to do with the vacuum that was left by the fall of Rome itself, and someone having to occupy that space. And the quasi-emperor position that the medieval popes assumed is a reflection of a historical reality, which is understandable. And actually, I will read a quote that has to do with the Great Schism, because I think it's a fascinating thing, especially with how they manipulated documents to kind of make this exaggerated claim. Quote, "If, however, there was no precedent for this extraordinary step, by what authority was it taken? And so we come to what was arguably the most momentous and the most successful fraud of the Middle Ages, that known as the donation of Constantine, according to which Constantine the Great, recognizing the primacy of his contemporary Pope Sylvester, had diplomatically retired to the province of Byzantium, leaving his imperial crown for the Pope to bestow on whomever he might select as temporal emperor of the Romans. This totally spurious document, fabricated around the turn of the century within the Curia, was to prove of inestimable value to papal claims for well over 600 years, its authenticity remaining unquestioned even by the enemies of Rome, until it was finally exposed in the middle of the 15th century by the Renaissance humanist Lorenzo Valla." So that gives you an example of how forgeries were even needed to kind of exaggerate the position of the Bishop of Rome, claim papal absolute jurisdiction, meaning that he can even depose other bishops, and that the church doesn't have autocephalous regions, but that they're all part of a single jurisdiction. And this is even prior to the claim of infallibility, which is something that developed in the 19th century, really. I mean, it was developing, but it was declared so in the 19th century. So that gives you a perspective. There's also another part in the book which I found it pretty fun, which is the blues and the greens, these kind of hooligan-like sport fans that also fight each other over theological issues, which I find fascinating. I mean, these people are fighting over very technical Christian theological terms and conceptions in the streets like gangs. And as a matter of fact, I would love to have a book only on that topic, just because it's so interesting. So if anyone knows a book on that topic only, put it in the comments, because I would love to read it. The book also goes over the iconoclastic controversy and includes the weird, controversial nature of Saint Theodora, the empress, because she is the one that brought the church back to the iconodules, the believers in icons, and fought against the iconoclasts and established, again, orthodoxy. And this is why Empress Theodora is key to the festival of the triumph of orthodoxy, because she's the one that did away with iconoclasm. And you do have some chroniclers and some contemporary historians that were very negative towards her, like Procopius, for example, who accused her of the most vile things ever. And I think the book did okay by mentioning the fact that everything that Procopius says has to be taken with a huge grain of salt. But it could leave the impression that there might be some percentage of truth to this, almost like a 50-50. But I've read other historians on this issue that make it clear that the odds of this being true are very, very low, that she may have had a somewhat dubious beginning in life, but that when she converted, she changed and became a holy empress. So this is another point of controversy, and it would probably require a lot more study, but still interesting, and I think it was fair the way he communicated this in the book. All in all, spectacular series, plenty of sources that can be explored as needed, and it's invaluable no matter your religious persuasion. If you're Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, it doesn't matter, because the Byzantine Empire impacted everyone in history to this day. So knowing about it will benefit you. So I'll make a playlist just for this series, and as I go through the other 2 volumes, I'll place them there and you can watch them in a row or however you want. So hopefully you enjoyed the review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Doing all these things helps the channel out, and I appreciate all of you that support what I'm doing here. So thank you for being with me. See you next time.